As Peter stumbled into the house, looking utterly drained, the Griffins were immediately assaulted by the overpowering stench of his breath. Lois, unable to bear it any longer, insisted that Peter visit the dentist. At the clinic, the dentist meticulously rummaged through Peter's teeth, only to discover a shrimp wedged beneath his gums. Surprisingly, Peter remained in good spirits throughout the ordeal, and Lois, impressed by his behavior, treated him to an elegant dinner at the Founding Father restaurant. During the meal, the waiter noticed Stewie coloring on a placemat and revealed that it was no ordinary doodle. It was a genuine treasure map. He explained that Quahog's founder, Miles Chatterbox Musket, had hidden his fortune during the Revolutionary War, terrified it might fall into the hands of British soldiers. Rumors suggested the treasure was still buried somewhere in Rhode Island. That night, Peter, buzzing with excitement, rallied his friends and proposed they join him on a treasure hunt. He confidently claimed that the placement map pointed to a spot by the highway. Joe and Quagmire, skeptical as always, laughed it off as another of Peter's harebrained schemes. But Peter pressed on, digging holes along the highway. Frustratingly, he found nothing. Not even a rusted coin. Just as Lois arrived to bring him home, Peter angrily hurled his spade into a hole. To his surprise, it struck something with a hollow thud. Peter's frustration gave way to exhilaration as he dug deeper and uncovered a small treasure chest. Inside, a parchment hinted at the treasure's next location. The discovery made headlines, with Chris gleefully pointing out that Peter had been spotted on TV, proudly holding the parchment. It wasn't long before the entire town of Quahog was abuzz, determined to decipher the clue and claim the treasure for themselves. To Brian's annoyance, the frenzy brought out the worst in everyone. Lois, too, grew uneasy, worried about how greed was already turning neighbors against each other. The clue directed them to Town Square. The Griffins raced to Town Hall at lightning speed, only to find a crowd gathered, staring up at the clock. Brian, analyzing the clue further, deduced that it referenced the statue of Miles Musket. A plaque on the statue read that the square honored Timmy Musket, a chip off the old block. This triggered Meg's memory. Timmy Musket was buried in a cemetery on Block Island. Determined, Peter and Lois decided to catch the ferry to Block Island, but Meg, driven by her own ambitions, teamed up with Chris to find the treasure independently. Meanwhile, the rest of Quahog mobilized in their own ways. Quagmire and Joe boarded a plane, Meg and Chris set out in a motorboat, and Brian and Stewie opted for a hot air balloon. Unfortunately, the baby dog duo overshot Block Island by miles. When Peter and Lois finally reached the cemetery, they were disheartened to see that many townsfolk had beaten them to it. A crowd had already gathered around Tommy Musket's grave. Ignoring Lois's growing concerns about the chaos, Peter shoved his way forward, spade in hand, and began digging. His obsession spiraled further when he punched Chris in a heated moment, driving Lois to storm off, taking Meg and Chris with her. As Peter unearthed a small casket, the crowd fell silent. But when it was opened, grief washed over everyone. It contained a child's skeleton. On the casket lid, yet another cryptic clue was etched, pointing to McCoy Stadium. The town surged toward the stadium, but Peter lagged behind, as Lois had taken his bike. When he finally arrived, he was horrified to find the townsfolk embroiled in vicious fights, like feral cats tearing into one another. Defeated, Peter trudged home and tearfully apologized to Lois for his reckless behavior and for mistreating her and the kids. Together, they reviewed the clue. Lois, using her sharp wit, realized it couldn't possibly refer to McCoy Stadium. Baseball hadn't even been invented during Miles Musket's time. Instead, she deduced that the drunken Miles had cryptically alluded to the Drunken Clam Bar. With renewed determination, Peter and Lois headed to the bar. There, behind a dusty painting of a drunken Miles punching his wife, they discovered the treasure. When they opened the chest, however, they burst into laughter. It held nothing more than an expired meal coupon for the Founding Father restaurant. In the end, Peter admitted that Lois was his real treasure, and that no adventure, except for sports, would ever be as meaningful without her by his side.